The Abercrombie Kids Summer Sale is in full swing, with up to 50% off select styles for the season. Summer plans, vacation, and camp days are all covered, with new dresses, shorts, tees, and swim. Abercrombie Kids has the summer staples they need and the looks that they want to wear. Shop in-store, online, or in the app. Offer applies to select styles as indicated. Discount applied at checkout online.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, I'm Amanda from Trifecta Fitness. We're proud to be Clarksville's new Get Fit headquarters. Trifecta Fitness is a state-of-the-art spin and strength training studio. Our spin studio is truly one of a kind in this area, complete with 20 state-of-the-art live fitness bikes and an incredible sound system. Our strength training is done in small groups of 6 or fewer, and all of our strength and spin classes are scalable for every level of experience. Come see us in the heart of Clarksville, just behind MAPCO at the corner of Old Trenton Road and Wilma Rudolph Boulevard. Call us for more info at 931-542-6265 or download our Trifecta Fitness app for a full list of upcoming classes.
Hello, my name is Damon Friedman, co-founder and president of SOF Missions. As a 20-year veteran within Special Operations, I've gone through many challenges due to my military service and time in combat. We felt called to start SOF Missions to serve our fellow brothers and sisters in arms, focusing on suicide prevention and resiliency. Our mission at SOF Missions is to empower warriors to find purpose and be resilient. Since 2011, when we started the organization, almost 3 million men and women have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the scars of war take a toll on their psychological, physical, social, and spiritual health. Many veterans feel a sense of hopelessness and a loss of purpose when they return to civilian life. They feel isolated and alone, unable to reconnect. And in the greatest of tragedies, over 20 veterans lose all hope and take their own lives. Our goal at SOF Missions is to provide veterans the tools and resources so that they don't become a statistic. We offer a unique approach to combating veteran suicide through a whole health, intradisciplinary model. The Be Resilient program is a 4-pillar methodology that addresses the areas of psychological, physical, social, and spiritual wellness. We provide care through 3 delivery methods: medical clinics, retreats, and educational training. Since we started back in 2011, we have been able to reach veterans in all 50 states and have served over 3,000 veterans through the Be Resilient program. Being resilient is a multifaceted and complex issue. We know that to find a lasting solution, we have to address the whole warrior. Many challenges cannot be solved by providing the treatments and modalities of just one component, but by tackling them all. Now, we've expanded our services to include law enforcement and first responders. Together, we can make a lasting impact in the lives of warriors across the nation. To learn more, visit our website at sofmissions.org.
All right. Welcome back.
MisFitNation. MisFitNation. The MisFitNation Show.
We are a show founded by a veteran and hosted by 2 veterans and a military spouse. Our mission is to get people to tell their stories to the world. If you're an author, share your tips with the Misfit Nation. If you're a musician or an actor, our audience need to know how they too can get into the business. Coaches, we love our coaches. Come on and share your tips with the Misfit Nation to help them become better versions of themselves. If you are a corporate leader or an entrepreneur, come on and show how you did it and how hard you have fought for success. If you are a veteran, first responder, or Gold Star family, We would love to have you come on and share your story with the Misfit Nation. We always have time for you. If you're feeling down, alone, or starting to see the darkness, stop. Think about those who are around you. You are not alone. You will be missed. If you feel like your problems will be a burden to those in your inner circle or feel embarrassed, dial 988. If you are a veteran, take option 1. We need you to keep pushing forward. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you are a new listener, welcome to the Misfit Nation Show. Be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast app. Also on our YouTube channel at @the_MisFitNation. Subscribe and click the bell to keep you up to date on our latest episodes and all of our news. You can also find us on Heroes Media Group and About Face Radio. Now, let's get to the show!
Houston, we have a problem. Again, Houston, we have a problem. It's Thursday, the after dinner show, and it's me, Steve. Rich, hopefully, will come in. He was away at work and he's on his way home. But tonight we have a show, and we're going to get to it in a second. First, I want to bring up, thoughts and prayers to the family of the 6 people who passed today when their helicopter crashed in the Hudson River here in New Jersey, between New Jersey and New York. Family of 5 from Spain, and their pilot went down, all presumed dead. It's a tragedy. Nextly, a strike soldier that served with my brother in Kandahar in 2010 and 2011, Travis Wilds, passed on 4/7, cancer. Remarkable life. 3 years, he way too young, 43 years old, valiant warrior. Personal life for his country, and he's been and will deeply be loved and forever remembered. Devoted father of 3 and a sergeant, 101st Airborne Division, Army Corps of Engineers. Thoughts and prayers out to his family of the tragedy in New Jersey and New York today. It's terrible. Tonight, we have Doyle Glass. He's a writer. He is a sculptor. He sculpts honor memorials in Texas and Kentucky. And I'm going to bring him in. We're going to start chatting. Good evening, Doyle. How are you?
I'm doing well, Stephen, and thank you for the words and prayers for those that we lost. I really appreciate what you said.
Thank you. I gave quick 2-second blurb about you. I know you've written a few books and you do great sculpting. Why don't you tell us about you?
Sure. Back in the early 2000s, wanted to have a career in art, but I've always had great admiration for those who fought for our country and all of our engagements, because it's because of our veterans and those who fight our wars that you and I are able to have our lives today. And I'm not a veteran, but I've always felt a personal sense of gratitude for our veterans, so that myself and my family can enjoy freedom and safety in this great country. So I started wanting to combine those two things, history and admiration for real heroes, with art. So in the early 2000s, I conceived and sculpted a bronze statue, first in 2001, the Kentucky Medal of Honor Memorial, designed to honor recipients of our highest award for combat valor from that state. And I sculpted a 6-foot tall bronze statue of a Medal of Honor recipient of World War II from Louisville by the name of John Squires. And then several years later, I'm a native Texan. I wanted to do the same for my native state, so I did the same. In this case, it was a Korean War Medal of Honor recipient from my hometown of Midland. And that memorial is in the St. Joe Artillery Historical Museum in St. Joe, Texas, while the Louisville one is in Louisville, Kentucky. From those two experiences, I thought these are incredible stories that our country, we don't know about. And that led me to writing, because that was the best way to tell all of these stories. Those were just two instances, those two great heroes that I sculpted. But I said, these stories have to be written. I grew up listening and hearing about the Vietnam War. I was too young to serve, but I certainly remember it. And I certainly remember the less than welcome reception that our veterans from Vietnam received when they came home, and how in reality, it seemed like our culture wanted to forget that war and that sacrifice. Our Vietnam generation were the sons and daughters of our greatest generation in World War II. We certainly honored them, as we should. And it kind of came to me, I felt at my time, my generation, to honor our Vietnam heroes. So when I began researching one specific operation, a lot of these firefights in Vietnam were very vicious, but smaller in scale than the Battle of the Bulge or Iwo Jima.
Right.
Very ferocious. And I found that there was almost nothing written about these stories. So I embarked then on interviewing the veterans who would talk with me, because
that's probably one of the hardest things, getting them to talk.
Stephen, it's incredibly hard. And the first thing I have to do is to thank them for opening up and telling me their stories, because PTSD, I mean, you name it. And a lot of the guys didn't talk to me. And I certainly, I'm not a veteran. I don't have PTSD. I've never been in combat, but I can only imagine the agony just to relive these things. So it's very hard, but without them telling the story, we won't know. We don't know. We don't know.
We actually interviewed a gentleman that was in the war, and he has written books, and he talked about how open he is and trying to explain it and not sugarcoat the stories, and how that scares a lot of people. And I congratulate him, because people I've talked to here in New Jersey and relatives, you mention how was it, or do you want to talk about it, and they grab a beer and they walk away, and they don't want to talk about anything about what happened during that war. And
right.
That one gentleman we spoke to was very open. It was an amazing chat.
And thank God that he's able to do that, so we can know, so that we can know the story. And we're losing our Vietnam generation. A lot of them, are still dying of cancer. Agent Orange is a long-term effect for I think a lot more Vietnam veterans than we even really know. So, and once they go, their story goes with them. So I was honored to talk with these veterans, to write 2 different books about 2 different combat actions in Vietnam as a representation of the war itself. And most importantly, from the standpoint and the viewpoint of the veterans, not a director over here or a writer that has never seen combat. I felt like my duty was to be a vessel for them to tell their story so that I could get it on paper. And I want to thank all of them again for trusting me. A lot of those guys are not with us anymore, but we have their stories because of them.
And that's a great thing. It's like you said, they're getting older, and as time passes, we're losing more and more. You see it at the VFW, you see it at the other posts. The older crowds are getting less and less and less, and a lot of them are closing down because of that, because the younger crowds don't want to be with the old men. But you're losing history there, and that's really what it is. You're losing a lot of history there.
That's right.
Let me ask you: are you still a prosecutor, or did you retire from that? Or you just write?
No, I really enjoyed being a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for, let's see, over a decade, but a lot of things happened in my life where I switched to art, and then I switched to writing. And one thing about going to law school and being a prosecutor is you learn how to talk to people, and you learn how to interview witnesses, basically. So I was able to take that skill in conducting interviews of these veterans for both books. And that process of interviewing the veterans took several years, because it was similar to if you're building a three-dimensional puzzle and you don't have any pieces, and the pieces are hidden in a haystack. You have to go find the pieces, then see how they fit to even know what story is going to come out of it. Does that make sense? It
does.
I only have like a general view of what happened in this particular action in both cases, but I felt very fortunate that because of my training as a prosecutor, I could use the witness interview techniques to kind of help me bring their story to light. So,
and how hard was it? How hard was it to get their trust to actually open up and talk to you, or did you just?
It was difficult in the beginning, and I say that I would speak to a few veterans, and then they would speak to the veterans that were more active in the associations that, had all the groups in it. And a lot of times these were the officers, the lieutenants in the company, or the company commander, the captains. And if I was able to gain their trust, then they put the word out to everyone else that, all right, this guy's legit. He's going to, tell a correct story here from our point of view. So in Swift Sword, my second book, for example, J.D. Murray was a lieutenant in charge of the company. Speaking with him extensively to gain his trust was the key to bringing everyone else in. And if I was able to do that and answer his questions and know that I was going to legitimately tell their story, then the veterans, came to me, and it was relatively easier, except for those veterans that simply couldn't speak about it. And, I recently did a couple of veteran interviews for a podcast, and was speaking to one of those veterans, and, he said, I can't do another interview. And this was like maybe 2 months ago. He said, the PTSD is just too bad. So I just don't, I'm glad I did what I did. And this is 50 plus years after the Vietnam War.
Because it lives on the back of their head rent free forever. It just sits there. It gnaws at them. And that's a terrible thing. Today, what's going on, yesterday, and way back then, it's just horrible what's in their heads, what they see, what they did. And it's, I can understand that totally. And I've never been in the military either. So I'm a retail manager. So I like talking to people.
Right. I understand.
My brother, 22 years, Jake, our other host, I think was 23, 24, they had big, long careers, and they did a lot of things. So there's things they'll talk about, things they won't talk about also.
Right.
And when they do talk about some things, it kind of break down, and it's really scary sometimes.
Right. It is.
To get things out of them, and for you to write 2 books and be able to interview people, that's, to me, it's amazing that you wrote 2 books with all different people actually talking to you about Vietnam. But I said, we had one on, and he was amazing, and I couldn't believe he talked so much.
And in writing these books, I learned a great deal about the mistakes that were made from strategic and tactical levels, things that we shouldn't do again. And that's where I'm hopeful, that today's military would look at these 2 books, read them, to not make the same mistakes. There were in Operation Swift in September of '67, defective M16s were issued to the men, and these the M16s would jam. And if you're in a firefight and you need an automatic weapon and you're outnumbered, your firearm jamming will cost you your life and the life of your comrades. And these men had to deal with that because it was a manufacturing problem. Yet the Marines were being told that they didn't keep their weapon clean. Well, that wasn't the issue at all. So that was one of the obstacles. Another obstacle would be the individual replacement system. In Vietnam, whole units did not refit. You basically, if you had casualties, you drew someone from the States fresh out of boot camp and put them immediately in a combat company. That created all sorts of unit cohesion issues. The new person would be known as the FNG, the blank new guy. He was isolated. The veterans were afraid to be around because he would make mistakes that cost lives. Just a really bad situation to having a company or a platoon to operate effectively in the field. That was a mistake. Another tactical mistake, just for an example, is that in Vietnam, because there were so few troops for the territory, they would be told to take a hill with casualties, then leave the hill only to have the enemy return to that hill and they'd have to retake it. That in World War II, for the most part, if you took a piece of ground, you kept it and you kept moving on. So there were a lot of mistakes on various levels made in Vietnam. In both of the books that I write about, we had a company of Marines, say 167, 170 max, be outnumbered and surrounded basically 4-1 and ambushed. So constantly they were facing overwhelming odds. I mean, think about the Battle of the Little Bighorn or the Alamo or the Battle of Thermopylae. That happened over and over. In many cases, the companies were wiped out, and we don't know anything because all the men died. And it's because of these small, ferocious actions that happened in that particular war that separated from. You hear about the big conflicts of World War II. Like I've mentioned before. So in both of these cases, you had a company of Marines, like I said, maybe 165 men, walk into ambushes, and where the enemy veteran troops, very hard fighting, tough Vietnamese troops that outnumbered our guys 3 to 4 to 1. That was not uncommon. And one of the great lessons from both books is how leadership on the ground, despite all of the difficulties, despite all of another difficulty is in both of these cases, you'd have a company commander with 3 new lieutenants under him in charge of platoons that had no combat experience, and he's never trained with them. So that's another obstacle in front of these guys. But in both of these cases, Operation Medina from our first book, Operation Swift in the second, leadership and cohesion and brother fighting for their fellow brother overcame incredible odds. And that's really the kind of what I've brought from both of these books and listening to these guys is how their brotherhood and their teamwork and the leadership, despite difficulties, overcame huge, almost insurmountable odds to at least survive another day.
And that was the hardest part back then, surviving another day, especially where they were and what was happening.
Exactly.
Tell me about your sculpting.
The sculpting was an amazing time. I don't have time to do it anymore because I'm writing now. So that's where I have my emphasis. The sculpting was incredible. I can, speak to the first one first, John Squires. And I was going through a difficult time in my life. We're talking now about 25 years ago, 2000, before 9/11. I decided that we needed a Medal of Honor memorial in where I lived at the time, Louisville, Kentucky. And going through the difficult time in my life, I found the story of John Squires, who, as a 17 or 18-year-old at a place called Spaccassassi Creek in Italy, this was before Anzio, when his army unit was about to be overrun by a very tough German unit, took it upon himself with no combat experience to basically take out the enemy, take out the Germans. And we're talking a 17, 18-year-old kid, really. And there was a national cemetery not far from my home at the time. And I discovered that he was buried there because he was killed at Anzio. And I remember walking out and finding where this young man was buried, and how I was kind of overwhelmed about the sacrifice as I saw all of these other kids the same age killed in 1944, 1943, 1945. And there he was with his headstone, it was a Medal of Honor, and it's embossed in gold, so you could see that it was different. But how he was just in this one cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, of so much sacrifice of our young men in that battle against fascism and Nazism. And I thought, wow, I'm so fortunate. I'm so lucky. But these men died for me. These men died for my family. These men died for future generations. And so when I found John Squires' grave, along with all the people just from Louisville who were killed in that period of time, that's when that idea really blossomed. So I then did research, found out what his equipment might have been. I was able to meet his family. At that time, his brother and sister were still alive, and I was able to meet them. I actually held the John Squires Medal of Honor. His brother was kind enough to show that to me. And it was just a great, I remember I had a studio that was a former living room, and I converted it to a sculpture studio. And I had basically a 6-foot figure made of clay in my former living room. People probably thought I was crazy, but I was able to sculpt and create it there. And then the process is it's an ancient process called the lost wax process.
You froze up on me there. Doyle. I can't hear you. I don't know if you need to back out and come back in. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having technical difficulties. And he pops out and hopefully he comes back soon. Right now it's me and you. And I have nobody to chat with because the chat isn't there. Oh my goodness. This is crazy, ladies and gentlemen. I hope there's actually people out there watching this. And I apologize. My brother's not here. I don't have all the chat, so I don't get questions. And right now, we'll see if we get him back. You're back.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, great. Great suggestion.
Froze for a second, and then the sound went. I was like, "Oh!" You started talking about the wax.
Right. So I had the clay in the living room, and without going into detail, but they were able to take that and make a mold. It's called the lost wax process. That's a lot of detail, and then make the bronze statue. And you can certainly see photos of that online. But that was an incredible experience.
And you did all of that. I mean, just made the sculpture, then they made the bronzing of it. But you made that all in your living room? And was it
in my former living room, I sure did.
Yeah.
And it was a clay, an oil-based clay that doesn't dry. So, I could spend many weeks working on it to make it right. And then it gets transported. And I remember the foundry came and put it in the bed of a pickup. And so you see a soldier going down the street to the foundry to be cast in bronze. So I have photos of that somewhere, but it's a pretty funny sight. And for my second sculpture, which was larger, I converted my garage to a studio because that statue is actually closer to 8 to 10 feet. But when people would come up to my driveway, they'd see a soldier looking at them through the window of the garage door. So that was kind of funny as well.
No, all detail with like patches and stuff on it, and
they were both depicted as I think they would have appeared in combat.
Oh, okay.
For John Squires, that was an Ike jacket, I think is what they called it. Combat helmet, M1 rifle, the web and the ammo pack in the canteen, and the boots with the leggings. Right. That's basically it. It was a night action, cold rain, and he was going between lines and dodging mortars and machine gun fire. So both of them are depicted as they might have appeared in combat.
Okay. I would think that would be a better for visual people than standing in the uniform on, because the uniform wasn't what it was all about. It was the fact that they were in combat and the heroic things they did.
And for George O'Brien, the Texas Medal of Honor, I was very fortunate to actually meet him. He earned the Medal of Honor in Korea at a place called the Hook. And he was a platoon commander and led a charge against communist Chinese, again, vicious fighting, very hard fighters, and was able to take that position called the Hook. And there's a great interview of him on the National Medal of Honor website. I was able to meet him. My son was about 8 at the time, and I introduced him. And then he passed away shortly after that. But it was a real honor to actually meet him. And the same with him. He was able to tell me what he carried as a second lieutenant. I think it was a second lieutenant. I'm not sure, first or second lieutenant in Korea. And so in his case, it was the M1 carbine rather than an M1 rifle. So small details like that to try to be actual and historically accurate were very important to me. And it was incredible to meet George O'Brien so he could actually tell me. Now he was very emotional and didn't really speak about the action that he served and got the medal in, because he lost he called them his kids in that action. And like that interview with him on the National Medal of Honor website is very moving. And I suggest your listeners, look it up, George O'Brien in the Korean War. So, and there's so many examples of these kinds of heroes that we need to know about. And I'm, like I say, I'm honored just to be able to be a part of their story to kind of tell it. And thank you for, your show for getting the word out about these heroes, because it's very important.
And that's what the show is all about. Like I said, my brother retired and Jake retired. We reach out, we interview them, we talk to them, and they're all in the chat. It's a great thing. My brother called it the MisFitNation because of the band of people he worked with. They were his family. They were a little MisFitNation, in themselves. That's what they called themselves, the Misfits.
Right.
That was his people. They are and were his family. The ones that are still here and we've lost. And
I want to, and all of the veterans out there listening and their families, it's just, personally, thank you. And I don't know what that means, but it's because of our veterans and locally our first responders, our police, that we're able to live the lives we lead. And that's fundamental.
That's
fundamental.
the God honest truth. Right? And a lot of people, don't want to back this, don't want to back that. You have to back these people because without them, we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
And with regard to Vietnam, let's not make those mistakes again. We didn't know things properly about what we were getting into with Vietnam. I mean, one of the basic maxims of the art of war is know your enemy. Well, we didn't really, in my mind, take the time to know what are we doing and what are we trying to accomplish. If you're going to send our young men and women into combat, have a clear objective and reach that objective. And that's why I think my books their story of the veterans, what they tell me is so important so that we don't make, similar mistakes.
Well, today, it's all, everything's computer satellites. Back then we didn't have most of what we have now, where they can go and say, this is where you're going to be, this is what you're going to do. They pretty much said, here's your gun, go.
Right.
Today we don't do that no more, thank God.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and half the time it could be somebody sitting in a hut 800 miles away controlling a drone and take care of a problem where we don't even have to send people sometimes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
That's one big upgrade from back then. We still have our problems. My brother talked when he was over because he did a few tours and Humvees without armor plating in them, things like that. That when you're rebuilding things, you don't have the parts to rebuild them if they're broken. And then that armor plate, you're getting shot at and the bolts come right through. But
Right.
little by little, they fix it. Little by little, it gets worse. It goes up and down every day.
Right. Right.
It's like technology. The great Google.
Exactly.
High speed internet, and we're both lagging.
Right. Right.
My brother has all your information in the show notes, so if people want to get in touch with you or look up your books, we'll have that all posted in there.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have your site. I was looking at it before, so I want to actually look at your sculptures. I'm going to look that up after the show's over.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, what else would you like to talk about? Anything?
Well, let's. As far as, and I have a copy of the Swiss Sword here, and if I can, do it that way.
That's a nice
this, and I'll speak to this just Swiss Sword. I originally published it in 2018, and I had gone through a lot in my life at the time. 2014. My wife at the time had breast cancer and passed away, and I had a small daughter, and I was, overwhelmed taking care of them and also trying to write this book. And so I published it in 2014. The veterans were happy with it, but I opened it back up about 8 years later, 2022, after having not looked at it. And the first thing I noticed was it's not finished. And I think that the time in my life when I was writing it, I just had so much more on my mind that I wasn't completely clear on what I wanted to do with that book. So in 2022, I opened up that first edition after not looking at it for probably 7 years or more. And I said, it's not finished. And then why is it not finished? And I thought about that for about a day, and it dawned on me. It wasn't finished because it was me doing the talking in the book. I wasn't there. I wasn't in Vietnam. I said, okay, how do you fix it? And I went back and found an old email from J.D. Murray, the company commander, when I mentioned him earlier, and I said, what do you want out of this book? And he said, you need to go read a book about Marine combat in World War II called With the Old Breed, and it's by E.B. Sledge. This was a personal memoir of the Pacific fighting on Tarawa and later Okinawa. The HBO miniseries, The Pacific, was based in part on Sledge's memoir. So J.D. Murray said to me, he said, your book needs to be like that book, because that's what combat is. It's not pretty. It's ugly. It's very hard. And that's what Sledge's book is. It's a very hard read. So fast forward now to 2022, and I look at the first Swift Sword, and I said, I did not accomplish what J.D. Murray asked me to do, meaning this book is not like With the Old Breed, the World War II book, the memoir. Why is that? And I said, because we don't hear from the veterans. So it dawned on me. I said, the veterans need to speak in this book. I was able in 2022 and 2023 to access all of my old interviews, and a lot of them were online in my email box because I had lost the hard transcripts, but I still had the transcribed interviews, and a lot of these guys had passed. I'd say close to half had passed away from the initial interview, but I still had their words. So it was an incredible experience in 2022 to go back to these old interviews, take the original book and put their words in that book. And when you read Swift Sword, you'll see the veterans' words in italics. And it made the book. I finished the book. I completed my assignment. It was not lacking anymore because the men were speaking themselves. And in many cases, men that were speaking were not with us anymore. And I felt a great satisfaction. And it's a hard read. It's not, it's like E.B. Sledge's book, his memoir. It's ugly. War is ugly. But it was now the men speaking. It wasn't me, this writer, writing it down. It was actually them speaking. So very, very proud of that. Even since then, we've lost a couple of men that were, since the second edition, who fought. Fred Tankey was one of them who was involved in a lot of the most intense action. So it gave me great satisfaction to be able to finish the book and tell it in their words. And on this one day, September 4th, 1967, in one 24-hour period, there were 2 Medal of Honor recipients, 3 or 4 Navy Crosses, which are one step under the Medal of Honor as far as a combat decoration, and scores of other awards given. And it's not the awards, or the medals. They don't even call them awards. It's the scale of the heroism, the scale of the camaraderie, the scale of the drama and tension just in that one 24-hour period. You had Father Vincent Capodanno, who was a Navy chaplain, who close to 40 years old, they called him Gramps. He was ordered on this particular day. This was a rescue operation basically from one company to another. He was ordered to stay back with the battalion in safety, and he disobeyed orders and was a stowaway on one of the choppers to go out into the field with his Marines. On Operation Swift, when the men were ambushed, Father Capodanno was out helping the Navy corpsmen with the wounded, providing last rites to Marines that were dying, oblivious to the complete danger around him, and was actually killed himself while attempting to come to the aid of a mortally wounded Navy corpsman. That story is just an incredible story. You have the story of Sergeant Larry Peters, who was a veteran SALT, as they called him, at 20. I think he's 20 years old, on his second tour of duty, who was ordered to take a squad over the hill to attack a tree line in order to relieve the pressure of this immense ambush by the North Vietnamese army. Ran into a buzzsaw of overwhelming force as he took this small squad to take the tree line, but was able to negotiate a retreat under order. I can't remember the exact term, but a tactical retreat to keep his men in line so that they could form a perimeter and not be overrun. And all while doing this, he's standing up with his machine gun, firing at enemy positions, making himself a target so that the other Marines could know where to shoot, if that makes sense. And he was also killed at that time. So these are just some of the, and those are just two small, those are the two Medal of Honor recipients. I mentioned Lieutenant Murray, who received the Navy Cross for his leadership. He was able to keep everything in line under this intense stress with his platoon commanders calling in air support, directing troops. At one point, when his one of his platoon commanders was taken out and out of action, he had to go down the hill under an immense fire, speak to a sergeant and put him in charge, and then get back up to his position of safety so that he could, relative safety, so that he could direct his company. And that story of leadership is just amazing. So I could talk all night about what these men did. And this is just on Operation Swift. Haven't even talked about Operation Medina, the other book, Lions of Medina, where these men were ambushed in the Highland National Forest. So a completely different set of terrain. I haven't done a good job explaining all of that, but the heroism there was just, it's mind-boggling. So I don't know if that's some of the things you want to hear about.
Well, that's fantastic. But like I said, when you spoke and he said to write your book the way they did this, you're doing it from the outside. You were not there. I was not there. So you had to hear stories and then write a book, where other people write the book being there. So you get both sides. Your side where you're getting the information from somebody, and somebody else writing a book saying, I was there, this is what we did. You can't make your book theirs, but you can make it just as good by telling the story and putting the quotes in there, and that's what makes the book better.
Exactly. And to that point also, when you're writing about a company, 167 odd men on one day, you'll have one Marine on one part of the line. So these guys were ambushed, they were in a perimeter. So if you have one Marine on one part of the line, he only knows what's in front of him, behind him, and the two sides. So what's going on it could be a million miles away of what's happening in the command. They were in a bomb crater, so I called it the command crater. So from my point of view as a writer, a lot of the guys would say, I never knew that happen, because they weren't there. They were a few feet away or a few yards away on their part of the line. And it completed the story of that day for them. But also as a writer, I was looking at real time. A lot of this action happened simultaneously. So writing a timeline, that's linear, but you could have, I'm writing about something that happened on this part of the perimeter and then something that happened over here. They could be happening relatively at the same time, but you can't present it that way. You just have to say, right, at the same time, this was happening over here. So it's very complex. It's putting it together was I mentioned earlier, like a 3-dimensional puzzle, meaning you've got spaces out here and you don't have the pieces yet. So you don't even know what you're building, but that's also part of the challenge and the fun actually is right, to, what is your story? What did happen? And so as a prosecutor, you building a case, that's what you do. What happened? And that was actually kind of a lot of fun seeing this. Fun's not the right word, satisfying seeing the whole story kind of come together as the veterans helped me find the pieces and help them put them in the right place. So that's also very
puzzle together. Yeah.
It's a puzzle. And as I mentioned earlier, especially with Vietnam, there's not much written. There's not much out there. So for both of these books, I'd say 90+%, if not 98% of the material to write the book came from the veterans and was not available anywhere else. So that also was satisfying in the sense that now we have a little bit of a piece of that history that might not have been there, but for these veterans telling their stories. So that was very satisfying as well.
And for the younger generation to actually read to see what actually went on back then, because like you said, there's not a lot out there, not a lot of people talk about it. So,
and to that point also, in both books, I spend some time talking about their reception when they came home. And, now I think we're in a decent place of thanking our veterans. But back then, they'd walk off the plane after surviving 13-month tour of duty, lucky to be alive with the scars that they had, walking through Agent Orange, which would come back to haunt them later, only to be greeted by eggs and tomatoes and being spat upon, being called baby killer, warmonger by these people, back home. I can't imagine that. And just to be vilified by your own people after fighting for your country like your father did in World War II. That's one of the strangest things for me, is that in World War II, our soldiers, when they came home, received the ticker tape parade. You had the GI Bill, welcomed home as the heroes that they were. Right. But then their sons, in many cases, received a direct opposite greeting. And to me, that's another reason why I wrote both of these books, was like, all right, honor these guys the way they're supposed to be. We do have the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C., which is incredible and very moving. I was able to go find some of these names that I wrote about, of some of the guys that didn't make it back. And that was haunting to see their names on that wall, people I've never met or heard about, but talking with the veterans. So that has been very incredible. But to have that reception for these guys said, no, we need to fix this. we need to at least push back on that. And even now, when you hear about stories of the Vietnam War, lots of times they'll come with a political edge or some kind of viewpoint that's not really correct. And I don't like that either, because that's somebody's spin on that time and on that conflict. Bad things happen in war. Don't get me wrong. War crimes happen in all wars. They always have. It's an ugly business, and it doesn't justify any of it. It's just something that does happen. And when you put 18-year-olds in combat and they lose their close buddy, that's a bad setup. But our veterans that fought in Vietnam fought predominantly for the same reasons as their fathers in World War II. And when it came down to it, they really fought for their brother next to them, their buddy who they eat and sleep with and fight with, who's going to be there for them to save their lives. And he's going to fight for that brother or sister next to him. And that's another thing that really stressed upon me, was the brotherhood that these men have. I was fortunate to go back to Vietnam in 2009 with a lot of the Operation Swift veterans, and they were able to find the battlefield where Operation Swift on September 4th was fought. It's called the Knoll. And seeing those men and the camaraderie and the brotherhood that they still had was amazing to me, closer than many brotherhood, natural siblings that I've seen. Was very awe-inspiring. And they also had a camaraderie with some NVA soldiers, retired NVA soldiers that they talked to, which was also healing, I think, for all sides. So that brotherhood is incredibly special. incredibly special. And it was once again an honor for me to write about it, right, and to at least be there and to witness it.
Right. My partner Jake dropped a question. He wanted to know what was more rewarding, writing the books or meeting the families after doing the sculptures.
Both, and it's very hard to separate the two, because the families of the two sculptures, and then of course the veterans, the families of the veterans that I met, I've developed some incredible friendships. For example, Lieutenant Jack Ruffer was one of the heroes from Operation Medina. We've talked about Swift a lot, but Operation Medina and my first book, Lions of Medina, he passed away a few years ago of cancer, but he was a great friend of mine. He became a great friend, and he helped shepherd that book and keep it historically accurate. And an incredible gratitude to him and his family. I just count them as friends. So to answer that question, it's both. The friendships are incredible. I value them tremendously. And just being able, I mentioned when all this whole journey started with that first sculpture. It's gone from sculpture to writing, but it started with that first sculpture of John Squires, meeting that brother and the sister of this young man that had died in 1944 and holding his Medal of Honor. It's really hard to describe that. And like I said, finding him in that cemetery. So it's all incredibly rewarding, but I'm also going to tell you it was hard. It's tough. It was tough stuff. When I had my own family, like I mentioned, my wife that passed away and her struggle and battle, and then, trying to write a book about, the young men fighting and dying, that was hard. It was not easy to do, but at the end of the day, very, very valuable and very satisfying having done so.
All right, Doyle, we've talked about 50 minutes now. I think it's time to start winding down.
Okay.
We lose we find a lot of viewers lose interest after like 45 minutes. So I don't like going up for an hour. What we normally ask our guests is, what 3 things you need to do every day that are non-negotiable for your day to be complete in the morning? You wake up,
Oh, that's a great question.
Non-negotiables.
I'm a very spiritual person. I'm a Christian, and the first thing what I do is I have a mantra of many things, but personally, I trust Christ, and I ask for the Holy Spirit to come in to wash away any difficulties I had, and to give me the strength to live and be very grateful for my wife and family and the life I have, and to let me approach every day with enthusiasm, to do the hard work, and to be happy and grateful for that. So that's probably the first thing that I do is I ask for and it works. I just have to take some time and just a few minutes of quiet space to center myself, ask for the Holy Spirit to come in, and it works, and that sets me on my day every day. Other things: eat right, exercise. I have a mantra of things that I've learned in my life that I'll go through and read, just once again, like the spiritual part, to kind of set my mind straight, and then I get to work after I do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
That's what we ask every guest, 3 things, and that was your 3 things. That's great.
Right.
I want to thank you.
And it works. So I feel very, blessed and happy because of that.
And I appreciate that. I want to thank you very much for coming in tonight and chatting with me.
Oh, it's great. And thank you, Stephen, for having me. Thank you for what you do. Getting the word out. Somebody like me can write a book, okay? But if nobody knows it's there, and if nobody knows what it's about, and nobody knows these stories, then, what good is it? So shows like yours, getting that word out is pretty incredible. So I want to thank you for doing what you do, because it's very important.
I've been doing this almost a year now, and it's getting better and better all the time. And just getting the word out there, trying to help people, and like you with your books, getting your book information out there, getting people to go look at your books is something that really feels good. Getting it out there and helping people.
And you may not know 90% of the time who you've helped, but know that you are helping. I mean, that's another thing I've learned, is that I might not see it, but it's out there. So thank you again for doing what you do.
That's and thank you for being a guest tonight. Like I said, all your information is going to be in the show notes. So if people want to look up your book, or if they want to get in touch with you, they'll go to your website, fill out the little form so they can talk to you also there. Okay?
That sounds great.
Okay. Thank you. You have a great night.
Stephen.
Good night, MisFitNation. Take care now.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking us out and being a part of the Misfit Nation show. Don't forget to visit our website at themisfitnation.com. That's themisfitnation.com. Check out all our past episodes and get some of the great Misfit Nation gear for you and your family. As always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling, because we are
Misfit Nation. Misfit Nation.
Paradise is back.
It's finally here.
In a new location, Costa Rica. There will be adventure, drama, and romance.
All gas, no brakes. That's my vibe.
Ready to find some love. But it wouldn't be paradise without surprises along the way.
These kids need to learn.
That's right. Your favorite Golden alums are crashing the beach.
We bring in a party, baby.
Bachelor in Paradise. New Mondays at 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.